After Christmas, he won't survive. That was the first sentence that echoed through my voicemail that night. A low, hurried voice, but one I recognized instantly. My son's voice, Ethan. My heart stalled. My hand froze on the cold pine countertop. For a moment I thought I misheard. Until a second voice cut in, sharp, metallic, unmistakably Tara. This $780,000 house will be ours. Sell it, pay the debt, move to West Hills. And then came the sound that sliced through me like a blade, the metallic click of my own safe being opened. A sound Elena and I once heard every month when we tucked away our savings. But this time, it sounded like the tearing of trust. The death of something sacred. I stood frozen in my dark kitchen next to a half-open box of Christmas decorations. The cold Oregon air didn't make me shiver, but those two voices, those two children I raised on a military pension, sent a chill down my spine deep enough to reach bone. Before I continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. We post new stories every single day, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Henry Collins, 68 years old, a retired Air Force pilot, a widower who's lived alone for 8 years in the pine cabin Elena and I once built our dreams inside. That evening, November 26, 2024, I had just driven home from the grocery store. In my trunk were 2 bags filled with everything for an early Christmas dinner, a turkey breast, golden potatoes, and the bottle of red wine I'd planned to open on Christmas Eve. I've always prepared early. Elena used to say Christmas isn't a holiday. It's a reminder that you still have a home to come back to. But that year, I didn't know the home we protected for 30 years was already sitting in the crosshairs of my own son. I parked in the garage, turned on the kitchen light, lit the fireplace, and pressed the voicemail button. I expected spam calls, medical reminders, maybe a holiday greeting. Instead, I heard Ethan and Tara and the sound of my safe opening. I replayed the message. Once, twice, 3 times. No background noise, no strangers. Just the 2 of them somewhere inside my house discussing my death as though it were a scheduling conflict. I pulled out a chair and sat down, leaning on the kitchen table. The warm light fell on Elena's photo on the shelf. Her smile seemed to ask, "What's wrong, Henry?" I couldn't answer. I didn't even know where to begin. 2 hours passed. I kept searching for excuses. Maybe it was edited. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe I was tired. Then my phone buzzed again. It was Mark Peterson, my old Air Force buddy, the man who once dragged me out of a burning Humvee in Iraq. His voice was low. "Henry, someone's been calling about your military records and retirement accounts. I don't know who they are, but the way they asked didn't feel right." I swallowed hard. What did they ask, Mark? They wanted to know if you still had the mental capacity to manage your own finances. My throat dried. My chest tightened. That was exactly what Ethan needed to file for temporary guardianship, the first legal step to taking my house. This wasn't fear, wasn't confusion. It was a plan. A step-by-step plan aimed at the weakest place in my life, my age. I hadn't noticed the sky turning black outside. I got up, turned off the kitchen lights, and stepped onto the porch to breathe some cold air. That's when I saw him. A man in a gray suit standing beneath the tall pine tree across my yard. Perfectly still, not smoking, not on his phone, not moving, just watching, studying the house the way someone studies an item before putting a price on it. The streetlight reflected off his glasses, hiding his eyes. For a moment I thought he was lost, but the second I stepped down 2 wooden steps, he turned, walked briskly to a gray SUV, and drove off like a man who knew every turn of my street. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room window, cracked open, listening to the wind drag itself through the pines. Maybe it was a real estate agent, maybe coincidence, maybe nothing. But 3 days later, Barbara told me the truth. His name is Jason Miller, a realtor who's been sued twice for coercing elderly homeowners into selling. Tara hired him to pre-appraise your house. I had never told anyone I planned to sell, because I never did. 30 years in the Air Force taught me one rule. People don't aim unless they intend to fire. Ethan and Tara didn't speak by accident. They didn't ask about my pension by accident. They didn't send that realtor by accident. Every piece was deliberate. And me, I spent so many years blaming myself for every crack in my family that I didn't see the whole foundation rotting beneath my feet. That night, replaying their voicemail the fourth, fifth time, I finally understood. Some cracks aren't meant to be patched. Some cracks are warnings. I stood up, opened the wooden cabinet, and took out my old pilot watch, the one with the reflective face design so pilots could check behind them in the cockpit. I held it to the window, looking at my reflection. An old man, gray hair, shoulders heavy, eyes lined by decades of scars. But behind those eyes, the same look I had the day I survived my first crash landing. I whispered, "If they want war, they'll get war. But I will not lose this house. Not the one Elena left for me." That night I sat alone watching the Christmas lights on the porch flicker in the wind. Another holiday was coming, but for the first time in my life, Christmas didn't feel peaceful. It felt like an alarm. And Ethan's words kept echoing like rounds chambering in a rifle. After Christmas, he won't survive. This house will be ours. And I knew Christmas 2024 wouldn't be a celebration. It would be the night I had to choose live or be replaced. After that night, I understood one truth. In any war, the survivor is never the strongest one. It's the one who knows how to wait. And I, a former Air Force pilot who once flew through red sky gunfire over Iraq, understood the power of silence. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is timing. Silence is choosing when to strike back. So I decided to play the part they wanted to see. A forgetful old man. A slow, slightly shaky Henry. A Henry who misplaced things. A Henry who seemed easy to manipulate, easy to deceive, easy to push aside. I let them believe that, and only when they truly believed it. I started watching. The first week of December 2024, the house that had been peaceful since Elena died began to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly in small, precise ways, like a rope tightening around the neck 1 inch at a time. On the morning of December 3rd, I walked to the garage to grab my truck keys. Same wooden tray by the door, the tray I had used for 15 years. But the keys were gone. I checked drawers, coat pockets, kitchen counters. Nothing. Tara walked out from the hallway, hair tied back neatly, holding a cup of coffee. She watched me search for a moment, then tilted her head. "Looking for something, Dad?" "Lost your keys again," I kept my voice soft. "I remember putting them right here." Tara sighed, the kind of sigh people practice in the mirror. "Dad, you're starting to forget things. Let me help." She opened the drawer under the sink, a drawer I never used for keys, and pulled out the exact keys I needed. She smiled sweetly. "See, you put them here. You must have forgotten." I took the keys and said nothing. But I knew one thing: Tara hid them. And this wouldn't be the last time. That night, for the first time in my life, I placed a black notebook on my desk and wrote, December 3rd. Tara moved the car keys. Intentional behavior. 2 days later, on December 5th, Ethan stopped by. He carried a small box. "I got you something," he said, placing a smartwatch on the table. "Tracks your heart rate, counts your steps. It's good for seniors." I stared at him. Not because I was touched, but because Ethan had never bought me anything for my health. He didn't remember my birthday. He didn't ask about my knee pain. He didn't check if I was sleeping well. But today, a smartwatch, I asked, "You want me to wear this?" "Yes," he said quickly. "So we know you're okay. We worry about you. That fake worry. I had seen it in war. It's the look of someone who wants your location 24/7. I strapped the watch on, But that night before bed, I took it off and placed it on the table right where Marjorie's porch camera could see it clearly. Weeks later, Barbara would tell me something that made my entire spine go cold. "Henry, the watch shared your location with Tara's account, not Ethan's. It wasn't a gift. It was surveillance." I opened the black notebook again. December 5th. Ethan gifted smartwatch. Purpose location tracking. On December 7th, around 11 a.m., my landline rang. A young man's voice spoke calmly. "Hello, this is Bend Federal Bank. We're calling to verify a $250,000 home equity loan under Mr. Collins' name. We need your customer PIN." I narrowed my eyes. What? Loan? There was a 1-second pause, the exact pause liars struggle to hide. Someone submitted an application under your file." I cut him off. "I never filed anything. Give me the application number." He hung up. I turned on my computer, went into online banking. 5 failed login attempts from an unknown device. 2 of them happened while I was asleep. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers on the desk, the same habit I had in the cockpit before making tough decisions. This wasn't concern. This wasn't family. This wasn't love. This was a takeover. Notebook. December 7th, fraudulent loan attempt. Suspects Ethan or Tara. On December 9th, I checked the mailbox. Between catalogs and bills sat a plain white envelope. No return address. No state stamp. Just my address printed perfectly straight. I opened it. Inside was one card. No name, no explanation. Just 3 handwritten words. "Check your attic." I stood at the bottom of the wooden stairs for a long moment. The wind outside creaked the roof, something normal, yet suddenly not normal at all. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up. The attic smelled of old wood and dust. Quiet. Still. But something was wrong. The dust on the floor had been disturbed. One of the storage boxes, the one with tax files, pension papers, insurance forms, was pulled slightly out of place. A single document lay outside the box. A copy of my retirement certificate. The exact document they would need to argue incompetency in court. I closed my eyes. No more doubts. No more excuses. Someone had been inside my house. Someone looking for the paperwork needed to take everything from me. I locked the attic door and wrote December 9th, unauthorized access. Target financial documents. Envelope sender unknown. Possible ally. That night I sat in my study looking at the yellow lamp reflecting off my old pilot watch. Outside the wind howled through the pine trees, a sound that reminded me of jet engines from another life. I opened the notebook again. Every line in it was a radar signal. Keys disappearing. Location tracking online banking attack. Files tampered with anonymous warning. And for the first time as a father, I admitted what I'd been avoiding for years. Ethan wasn't innocent. Tara wasn't clueless. And the plan was already in motion. I wrote one final line that night, December 9th. Henry Collins enters mission mode. Silence. Observe. Record. Wait. Some battles don't use bullets. No bombs. No screaming, just shadows moving through hallways, objects shifting an inch at a time and the tightening of a noose you didn't know was around your neck. But those battles are the most dangerous kind. And I, a 68-year-old man, was living in the middle of one. I knew one thing: if I didn't prepare, I would lose everything. And that was the moment I decided to call Barbara Lindstrom the woman who would change the entire outcome of this war. There's something I learned back when I was flying in the Air Force. When the radar starts to show interference, you find someone who knows how to read it. Not everyone can see a storm forming, but some people, they only need a single flicker of light to know it could tear the sky apart. For me, that person was Barbara Lindstrom. I met Barbara on the morning of December 11th, 2024. Bend was brutally cold that day, the kind of cold where every breath dissolves into smoke. I stood outside her law office, an old brick building with an east-facing glass door. Inside, thin winter sunlight slipped through a sheer curtain, painting a pale gold stripe across the floor. Barbara opened the door. Tall, silver hair pulled back neatly. Gray-blue eyes, the eyes of someone who has seen far more suffering than one lifetime should be asked to endure. She looked at me for one quiet second, and nodded as if she already knew why I was there. "I'm Barbara." "I know," I said, my voice low, rough after a sleepless night. She led me inside and poured a cup of hot tea. The steam rose softly, mixing with the scent of old wood. It felt strangely familiar, like the briefing rooms on base all those years ago. Barbara sat across from me, hands folded. "So she said you said this is a family matter." I nodded. Then I unlocked my phone, pressed play. Ethan's voice, Tara's voice, the metallic click of my own safe. When the voicemail ended, the room felt 10 degrees colder. Barbara didn't gasp, didn't interrupt, didn't ask for clarification. She simply exhaled the quiet breath of someone who had predicted the truth but still hurt to hear it spoken aloud. "You have every reason to be concerned," she said. I stayed silent. She looked straight into my eyes. "Do you understand what they're trying to do?" "I understand," I said. Then I told her something I knew she might judge me for, but at that moment I didn't care. "I don't want to call the police." Her brow tightened. "Why not?" I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had gripped a cockpit yoke for over 20 years. "In the Air Force," I said slowly, "we didn't call for backup just because we heard thunder." Barbara sat still for a moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. A small, sad smile of recognition. "In that case," she said softly, "we handle this ourselves." She pulled a folder toward her, opened it, and began writing on a blank page. Sharp, decisive strokes, deed title, bank accounts, emergency trust, property records. "Guardianship? Unauthorized appraisal?" I asked. "Which one first?" Her answer was immediate. "We shut every door they think they can walk through." 1. Update the deed title. We'll fix the ownership structure. If they plan to use your home for a loan, they'll hit a steel wall. 2. Freeze your accounts. Bank reported unusual logins. I'll take care of it. No one touches a cent. 3. Create a backup trust. If they try to claim you're incompetent, the trust will safeguard the home. You keep lifetime residency. 4. Review the entire property file. I want to know who Jason Miller is and why he was standing in your yard. The steam from my tea curled upward, and suddenly I realized I hadn't had anyone in my corner for a very long time. Barbara stopped writing and glanced at the photograph I'd placed on her desk. Elena smiling by Crater Lake in 2008, holding the old flight cap I'd given her. "When did you lose her?" Barbara asked. 8 years ago. She nodded. "I lost my husband 12 years ago. Pancreatic cancer." Suddenly, this wasn't just a legal consultation. It was two widowed people. Two people who were left behind, sitting across from each other, recognizing a loneliness they both understood too well. Barbara spoke softly. "Elder abuse doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the very people we loved most." I looked down at my hands, the wrinkles, the scars, the calluses of years of service. "You're right," I said quietly, "but I won't let them do it to me." Barbara closed the folder. Her eyes sharpened. "Henry," she said slowly, "I've handled many cases like this. Some involved physical assault. Some involved poison. Some involved selling an elderly parent's home while they were in the hospital." She paused. "But I've never seen anyone with evidence like your voicemail." I lifted my head. "You have something most victims never get," she continued. "You have their intent on tape." "I know," I replied. She leaned back in her chair. "Do you want to survive this? Or do you want to win?" I met her eyes. My voice dropped to a cold whisper. "I don't just want to survive. I want them to learn the lesson I failed to teach when I was still their father." Barbara's expression changed, determined, focused. Then from today on, she said we work together. She extended her hand. I shook it. It wasn't the handshake of a lawyer. It was the handshake of an ally. She slid a list toward me. Go home and do 3 things. 1. Keep a daily log. Time, date, who came, who left, anything moved, any strange noise. Don't trust memory. Trust the page. 2. Photograph everything, drawers, safe, attic, documents. If anything changes, you'll know. 3. No confrontation. No arguing. No questioning. People who plan to steal assets become dangerous when cornered. We need them confident. The more confident they are, the more mistakes they'll make. I nodded. And one more thing, she added quietly. Be prepared. When you go silent, they will get bolder. When I stepped outside, Bend was already dark. Christmas lights from shop windows shimmered across the wet pavement. The cold cut through my coat, but for the first time in months, I felt steady. Not because anything would be easy, not because I knew I would win, but because after months surrounded by shadows, someone finally saw me. I climbed into my truck, turned on the headlights, and started the engine. The road ahead stretched into the blue-violet night, a thin layer of snow glowing under the beams. I whispered just loud enough for myself. All right, Elena, your Henry is going to fight. And that Christmas of 2024 would become the first battle I wouldn't fly through, but the one I would stand and fight for right here on the ground. There was something Barbara told me before I walked out of her office that day. Bad people fear one thing, the light. I didn't think I would need that light so soon. But only 3 days later, when things in my house began shifting as if someone else were living there without my knowledge, I realized Barbara had been right. And then Marjorie Lane walked into my life, quietly, unexpectedly, and at exactly the moment I needed someone. It was the morning of December 14th. I was trimming dry pine needles around the porch when I heard the crunch of snow boots on the driveway. I looked up. Marjorie Lane, 72 years old, living 4 houses down, stood at the bottom of my steps with a basket of warm pastries in her arms. She wore an old ash-gray knit coat, hair silver and soft, blowing in the winter wind like fine thread. Henry, she called out, her voice low, raspy, but warm. I heard from Mark. There's something going on at your house. I stiffened a bit. Bad news travels faster than snowstorms in Bend. I invited her inside. Marjorie set the basket on my kitchen counter, glanced around once, and said something that sent a chill straight down my spine. Someone's been in your house without leaving footprints. I turned toward her sharply. She nodded toward the back hallway. The back door. The lock has a small pry mark. Someone got in clean work, but not clean enough for someone who was a cop for 30 years. My eyes widened. I thought you retired. Oh, I did, she said with a half smile. But my eyes didn't. Marjorie was a retired Portland police officer, a woman who didn't scare easily, a woman who didn't get fooled. I can help, she said, pulling a small box from her coat pocket. When people want your house, Henry, they'll do anything. Believe me. She installed the first line of defense. Marjorie led me to the front porch and pointed to the upper corner of the roofline. Right there. A porch camera. Wide angle. It'll see your entire front yard and the garage entrance. I stood next to her as she climbed the ladder, steady, practiced attaching the camera like she'd done it hundreds of times. Now let's check the garage. We walked inside. The familiar scent of motor oil and old lumber wrapped around us, a smell any man living alone knows so well he stops noticing it. Marjorie took out a tiny device the size of a thumb. A microphone, she said. Voice activated. When someone talks, it records. I hesitated. Is this legal? She shrugged. You're installing it in your own house. If someone comes in here and starts talking without your permission, that's their problem. She stuck the microphone onto the back of a metal tool cabinet. Invisible, silent, waiting. When she finished, she put a hand on my shoulder. "Henry, you're not alone." Such simple words, but for a man who'd lived by himself for nearly a decade, they felt like a warm coat draped over frozen skin. 3 nights later, the power outage. On the night of December 17th, Bend dropped to 7 degrees. Wind howled through the pines like a long scream that wouldn't let go. I was sitting in the living room when the lights flickered once, and then everything went dark. No heater, no hum of the vents, just the sound of the wind slamming against the windows. The outage lasted exactly 10 minutes. I knew because I stared at my watch the entire time. 10 minutes, not 9, not 11. When the lights came back, I felt something shift inside the house, something subtle and wrong. The same sensation that once saved my life in the cockpit when someone had recalibrated my instruments without leaving a scratch. I went straight to the porch. The camera, its red standby light, was dark. I took it down. Reset button unresponsive. Power fine. But when I slid open the memory card slot, the card was missing. Someone had waited for the blackout. Someone knew exactly where the camera was. Someone removed the card without damaging the device. I called Marjorie immediately. She arrived in 5 minutes, breath fogging, the air flashlight in hand. She examined the porch frame, leaning close, the beam of her light steady. Here, she whispered. On the wooden siding beside where the camera had been, a fingerprint. Small, partial, but clear enough to know it wasn't mine. And it sure wasn't hers. Someone had stood right there during the outage. Marjorie's voice hardened, colder than I had ever heard it. "Henry, this is no longer a family issue." She straightened up. "This is pre-crime behavior. Preparations. Someone is getting ready to do something very serious." She pointed to the back door, the door I always double-locked at night. A fresh pry mark. Thin, sharp, like a razor line etched into the metal. "When someone wants to enter your home quietly," she said, "they'll do whatever it takes to make sure you don't realize it." She paused. "But when they want your house, they'll work twice as hard." I stood frozen, winter wind slicing through the silence. The pine trees outside whispered violently as though the whole forest knew what I was about to face. Marjorie shoved her hands into her pockets. Her eyes were steady, fierce. "If they want your house, Henry, they'll stop at nothing. That 10-minute outage, that wasn't an accident." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with the realization of how far Ethan and Tara were willing to go. This wasn't a plan anymore. It wasn't talk. It was action. That night I sat alone in the garage. The yellow lamp cast a dim glow across the wooden wall. The small microphone Marjorie installed clicked faintly, a quiet sign that it was listening. I placed a hand on the cold metal of the tool cabinet. Took one long breath. I was no longer the father shocked by a voicemail, no longer the old man trembling at betrayal. I was a pilot again, a man who once survived by spotting danger in the dark long before it reached him. And now, the darkness had reached my front porch. I whispered to myself, a vow made by someone with no room left to retreat. All right, if they want to act like thieves, then I'll let the light expose every inch of who they really are. Some cracks in a family begin with words, and some begin with a silence that lasts just a little too long. After the 10-minute blackout and the missing camera card, I knew this battle had stopped being a father-son issue long ago. But I still didn't know how far they were willing to go. Not until Derek Field showed up at my door. It was the evening of December 15th, just as the sun dipped behind the Cascades, turning the sky into a cold strip of red and orange. A hesitant knock echoed through the house. I opened the door. Derek, Ethan's old classmate, stood there with his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his hoodie, eyes darting to the floor, unable to meet mine. I invited him in. The heat from my fireplace fogged up his shoes as they thawed. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked. He shook his head. He twisted the cap on his water bottle, swallowed hard, and then said something that made my heart drop into a deep, hollow note. "Mr. Collins, Ethan said you're starting to lose your memory, and he's getting ready to file for guardianship over your estate." The room tightened around me. Wind beat against the window like metal scraping bone. I asked slowly, "You heard him say that?" Derek nodded without lifting his eyes. "He told us you weren't all there anymore, that you've been forgetting things, accusing people, getting confused. He said it'd be safer if he took over the house, for protection." For protection. I had never heard two words sound more dishonest. Derek added quietly, "I didn't believe him. Seeing you like this healthy aware, I know something's wrong." I put a hand on his shoulder and thanked him. He walked out looking more worried than when he arrived. When the door closed, I exhaled a long, heavy breath as if letting go of the last piece of naivete I had left. That night I called Barbara. She answered after just 2 rings. "Tell me," she said. I repeated every word Derek told me. Barbara didn't sound surprised. She simply asked, "Do you understand what temporary guardianship means?" I didn't respond. She explained calmly, clearly, and the calmness was somehow colder than any panic could have been. With one medical note saying you have diminished capacity, they can request temporary guardianship for several days, and during those days, they can do anything. Anything, I repeated. Barbara's voice sharpened. They can control your bank accounts, change the ownership of your home, file that $250,000 loan, and sign the house away. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned pale. "With just one doctor's signature," I whispered. "Yes," Barbara said. "And based on my data, Tara has already searched 3 clinics that can issue that note within 48 hours. The cold inside my house felt like it seeped through my ribcage. Barbara continued, "You need to start recording, not because I need proof, but because you're dealing with people who understand your vulnerabilities." Then she said something I will never forget. "Bad people always think the elderly make easy targets. But you're not, because you know exactly where they'll strike from." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Later that evening, I went into the garage, opened an old toolbox, and pulled out the phone I used back when I was stationed on base. Solid, heavy, reliable, a brick of a device that recorded clearly and held power for days. I attached double-sided tape to the back and slid it into the narrow space behind the metal cabinet, exactly where Marjorie had suggested. "If they want to talk in here," I whispered, "I'll hear every word. No tremor, no hesitation. Only clarity. A clarity I hadn't felt since my early days in the cockpit." 3 days later, December 18th, Ethan and Tara stopped by. They said they brought Christmas gingerbread, but they barely spoke and neither of them could look me in the eye. That night when I went upstairs, I heard the garage door open. I moved down the stairs silently, as quietly as an old cat, and stopped halfway listening. Ethan and Tara had no idea about the microphone, or the old phone recording them from just above. Tara spoke first. Her voice low, cold, and sharp as winter wind. "All you need is the doctor's note. After Christmas, the house will be ours." Ethan replied, his voice trembling not from guilt, but from excitement. Henry's starting to suspect. "We need to move fast before he talks to any lawyer." Tara emphasized each word. "You don't understand. Just one doctor's signature. One. We get temporary guardianship, and the rest happens automatically." "What about Christmas Eve?" Ethan asked. Tara gave a soft laugh, a tiny brittle sound like a piece of ice breaking. "By then he'll be too distracted to question anything." The phone recorded every word, every breath. I stood on the stairs with my hand gripping the wooden railing, my heartbeat slow, heavy like a drum echoing in a deep well. This was no longer suspicion, no longer puzzle pieces I had to assemble. I heard the truth from their own mouths after Christmas. My house would be theirs, and I would no longer be an obstacle. That moment, I felt a coldness deeper than the winter storm outside, a coldness that didn't come from the Bend wind, but from the blood of my own family. That night I sat in the old wooden chair Elena loved, the lamp casting a long, quiet shadow across the room. I opened my black notebook and wrote my final line of the day, December 18th. No more doubt. They confirmed it. I'm no longer a father. I am a target. I closed the notebook. And I made a vow, not out of anger, but with the calm focus of a man who has survived too much to fold. Now I will not let them win. There are moments in life when time feels like it bends. No past, no present, just one image, one scent, one sentence, and suddenly you're dragged back to a place you never wanted to return to. For me, that moment came on the night of December 20th, 2024. 3 days after hearing Ethan and Tara plot to take guardianship. 3 days after realizing their Christmas plans weren't about family, but about removing me. I sat alone in my study, the window facing a wall of pitch-black pine trees. Wind pushed the snow into spiraling white coils like smoke rising off a jet engine. On my desk sat a wooden box I hadn't opened since 2016. Elena's box. The box of the woman I loved more than anything life ever gave me. And more than anything life ever took from me. I lifted the lid. Inside were a few small things, a worn hair clip, our scratched wedding ring, a photo of us at Crater Lake, and one pale yellow envelope. I'd read that letter many times after she died, but somehow, every time I read it, it changed something in me. I slid the paper out. Her handwriting was soft and light, yet there was strength pulsing beneath every curve. When the world makes you forget who you are, remember you once knew how to take off. My hand trembled, not from age, not from the cold, but because I could feel her breath in those words. I closed my eyes and pressed the letter to my chest. For a second I heard her laugh again, heard her calling my name in the kitchen, heard the wheels of her suitcase rolling across the gravel during our last trip to Washington. Everything came back like wind sweeping through a quiet room. Then I opened my eyes, but not like an old man grieving, like a soldier stepping out of smoke. The sound that pulled me back into the dark, I stood, walked to the window, and right then a faint buzzing sound drifted through the air. A sound so familiar my lungs froze for a beat. A neighbor kid's drone, the 15-year-old who sometimes flew it over the yard. But to me, that sound didn't belong to Bend, Oregon. It belonged to Iraq. Suddenly I was back in that cramped cockpit under red emergency lights, sweat dripping into my gloves, radar blaring because a PKM machine gun had locked onto us from the dunes. My chest tightened. The room shrank. The drone's buzzing twisted into the sound of bullets scraping the fuselage. I clutched the window frame, knuckles whitening. My breathing turned into sharp, rapid bursts, the same rhythm as waiting for a missile to find your coordinates. And then Elena's voice in my head. Not her real voice, but the memory of it, soft as a whisper. Henry, look at me. I shut my eyes tight. Counted from 1 to 10, the Air Force method for pulling yourself out of a PTSD spiral. When I opened them, the drone was gone. Only the silent forest remained still and heavy like a sleeping creature. I whispered to myself, no one's shooting at you. There's no battlefield. Just this house. And the people trying to take it. The letter that woke something up in me. I placed Elena's letter gently back on the desk and read her words again. When the world makes you forget who you are. Who was I? Just an old man living alone. A father his own son wanted to eliminate. A target for a greedy couple. Numb. I had been an Air Force pilot. I had survived things no man should ever have to survive. I had spotted enemies hidden in the night sky long before they ever fired. I was still that man. I had simply forgotten. I whispered, you once knew how to take off. Elena didn't write that letter to comfort me when she died. She wrote it to pull me back when the moment came. And that night, December 20th, the moment had come. I stood up like a spine straightening after months bent under grief. I looked around the room at every object Elena and I had chosen, at every piece of wood her hands had touched, at the life we built piece by piece. And for the first time, my voice didn't come from fear. It came from the righteous fury of a man who knows exactly what is worth fighting for. No one is taking the house Elena and I paid off for 30 years. The sound of my own voice startled me, strong, steady, deeply alive. Mission mode. I sat at my desk and opened the black notebook. Every line I'd written, the missing keys, the tracking smartwatch, the tampered documents, the guardianship plan, they all connected into a map any soldier would recognize. The enemy is advancing. And they're close. My hand didn't shake as I wrote December 20th. Henry enters mission mode. Mission mode. The mindset that brought my crew home alive. The mindset that saved me twice from hitting the dunes. The mindset that carried me through a life too many of my friends never returned from. I drew a hard line under the words. Mission mode. I stood, opened the steel cabinet, pulled out the encrypted hard drive Barbara told me to prepare. I plugged it in and began backing up everything: documents, photos, evidence, logs. I walked around the house and photographed every drawer, every shelf. I checked the locks, checked the windows, checked the camera, checked the mic, checked the garage recorder. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't allowed to sleep. Just before midnight I stepped out onto the porch. Bend was silent, so quiet it felt sacred. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, glittering in the porch light. I looked up at the black sky, a sky I had lived in for 20 years, and I said into the cold air, Elena, I'll protect this house, and I won't let its history be buried under the boots of people who never earned it. Wind pushed through the pines, carrying the scent of resin. The scent Elena once said smelled like freedom. And I knew. From this night on, I wasn't defending anymore. I was attacking. Some people run when cornered, some cry, some endure. But me, I once flew through live fire. I survived by seeing what others didn't. When danger gets close, I don't run. I activate mission mode. And on December 22nd, 2024, I began operating as if I were preparing for the final mission of my life. The battle map. I spread a large sheet of white paper across my desk. The yellow lamp above cast a glow that reminded me of pre-flight briefing rooms. With steady hands, I drew the entire layout of my house. Front door, back door, garage hallway, attic living room, where Tara whispered to Ethan, kitchen, where Elena's wooden spoons still rested in the same drawer. My bedroom, where wind slipped through the doorframe every night. I marked entry points, recording zones, vulnerabilities. Back in the Air Force, I used to sketch enemy base layouts from memory after brief reconnaissance passes. One rule had always been true. Whoever controls the map controls the battle. And this map, my home, was the foundation of everything that came next. Tracking Tara like tracking an enemy patrol. I opened my black notebook. Tara's schedule. Deck 15 to Deck 22. I wrote down every movement. 7:45 a.m. Tara leaves for work in the Subaru. 12:10 p.m. Returns for exactly 20 minutes lunch break. 5:30 p.m. Comes home but stays in the car 4 to 5 minutes talking to someone. To and through leaves at 7:15 p.m. No explanation. One time she circled the block 3 times before turning in a move I recognized immediately. That's paranoia behavior. That's someone afraid of cameras. No one observes another person more closely than someone calculating their own risk. Tara had made herself the brightest mark on the page. The garage recorder clearer than any confession booth. The old phone I'd taped behind the metal cabinet worked flawlessly. Strong battery, clear audio, no internet, no hacking risk. I tapped the cabinet twice, a hollow metallic echo. It felt like it was telling me, I'm here. I've got your back. And honestly, I trusted that phone. More than my own blood. Securing the evidence, the runway lights, I pulled out the encrypted hard drive Barbara had given me. Black, heavy, like holding a brick of steel. I backed up camera recordings, photos of the house day by day, property documents, receipts, bank statements, the voicemail from Ethan and Tara, the fingerprint photo from the porch camera, my daily logs. A green light blinked, transfer complete. That green light looked exactly like runway lights at night telling a pilot the path is clear. Barbara's call, checkmate, at 11 a.m. on December 22nd. Barbara called. Her voice held the steady confidence of someone who had just won a game of chess she'd planned 30 moves ahead. Henry, the transfer of your house to the Bend Education Foundation has been approved. You retain lifetime residency. I closed my eyes, not from exhaustion, from relief so deep it felt like landing safely after an 8-hour mission through hostile airspace. Barbara continued, because the house now belongs to the foundation, the bank must cancel the loan they nearly approved under your forged signature, and they'll forward the file to fraud investigation. I asked quietly, what does that mean? Barbara replied sharp, cold. It means Ethan and Tara are trapped legally before they ever got their hands on anything. In a single day, their months-long plan collapsed like a tower made of wet paper. Attorney fees, application penalties, reevaluation charges, a financial black hole that would drag them toward bankruptcy by February 2025. I didn't create that outcome. Their greed did. The final proof and the line they crossed. That night I received the last piece of evidence, one that wasn't about stealing my home, but about eliminating me. Around 9 p.m. I heard the garage door open. Ethan and Tara came in as if the place already belonged to them. I stayed silent, waiting. The microphone and hidden phone started recording. Ethan whispered, "You're sure about this?" Tara's voice came back so cold it felt metallic. "You think the $400 worth of pills wasn't worth it? I don't want him waking up." I stopped breathing. Ethan stammered, "Maybe there's another way?" Tara cut him off. "Ethan, wake up. If he stays alert, we lose everything. If he sleeps, everything becomes ours." I froze. Those words echoed in my skull like the first artillery shot of a war with no retreat. I don't want him waking up. This was no longer guardianship, no longer fraud, no longer manipulation. They were planning to poison me. I pressed a hand to the wooden frame of the hallway, gripping so hard I felt the grain break. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the truth slicing through me like a blade. My own family wanted me gone. Completely. No illusion left. No excuse left. No forgiveness left. From that moment I understood I was no longer fighting for my home. I was fighting to stay alive. Later I sat in my study, the desk lamp glowing softly over Elena's letter. A gust of wind made its edges flutter like her hand resting on my shoulder. I whispered, "Elena, I'm ready." I opened the black notebook and wrote my final line of the night, Deck 22. They crossed the line that cannot be forgiven. From now on, I'm no longer defending. I drew 2 hard, decisive lines beneath it. Mission mode, full. And I knew my real war was just beginning. Christmas Eve of 2024 didn't come softly. There were no warm lights glowing through the pine trees, no laughter drifting from kitchen windows, no faint smell of cinnamon or hot cocoa in the air. Instead, the day began with the sharp, cold wind of Bend, Oregon, cutting through the pines like a warning, as though winter itself knew what was about to unfold in my home. I woke at 5:30 a.m., not because I couldn't sleep, not because I was excited, but because a feeling deep, instinctive, unmistakable pulled me awake. Tonight would decide who walked out of this house alive, me or the people sitting across from me at dinner. I stood in the kitchen in the pale morning light. The house was quiet, too quiet for Christmas Eve. No music, no humming from the heater, just the faint crackle of cold air sliding across window frames. I turned on the stove. The warm light touched the edges of the cookware Elena bought in Portland years ago, the pots I still cleaned by hand because she always said metal remembers how you treat it. I prepared the meal, like a soldier prepares for a mission thaw. The turkey peel, the potatoes, rinse the herbs, set the table. Check the knives, rehearse the small. Prepare for the large. Every movement slow, deliberate, measured. It wasn't cooking. It was ritual. And though the house was silent, I could hear the battle approaching. It had been approaching for months. 9:00 a.m. The call that changed the battlefield. Barbara called right as I pulled the turkey from the fridge. Her name lit up my screen like a beacon. I answered. She didn't say hello, didn't clear her throat, didn't warm up the conversation. Her voice had the clarity of someone holding a weapon loaded with truth. Henry. The foundation signed the final documents. Your home is officially protected. Nobody can touch it, not legally, not financially. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, my lungs filled completely. She went on. The bank has canceled the fraudulent $250,000 loan, and they've opened a full fraud investigation, which meant Ethan and Tara couldn't force me into guardianship. They couldn't sell the house, couldn't use my name, couldn't touch my finances, couldn't take a penny from me. I whispered, "Thank you, Barbara." But she answered quietly, firmly, "Don't thank me. Just make it through Christmas Eve. After tonight, everything gets easier." The line clicked dead. I stood in the middle of the kitchen staring at the frost on the window. I had saved the house. Now, I had to save myself. Afternoon. The quiet before something terrible. The hours crawled by like cold molasses. Outside, snow drifted down in slow, delicate spirals, the kind of snowfall that should bring peace. Inside, the house felt like a room waiting for an execution. I swept the floor. I lit candles. I checked the oven. I wiped the counter. Small things. Human things. But every second, every minute, I felt the weight of the night approaching. Around 5:45 p.m., I put on Elena's favorite holiday sweater, a dark green one she knit for me during her last winter. Not because I felt festive, but because I wanted a piece of her with me. If this was my last night, she deserved to be here. 10 p.m. They arrived. Tara's Subaru pulled up, first headlights cutting through the dark. They got out with forced smiles plastered across their faces, the smiles of people acting for an audience that they think is too old to notice. Tara carried a bag. Ethan carried nothing. Typical. "Dad, Merry Christmas," Ethan said. His words were warm. His eyes were ice. Tara didn't hug me. She barely acknowledged me. Her gaze flicked along the living room walls, noticing every piece of furniture, every painting, every inch of the home she thought she'd soon own. I led them to the dining room. The turkey was carved, the candles were lit. Everything looked peaceful, but under the warm light, tension coiled like a snake. Tara insisted on pouring the wine. Of course she did. She selected a deep red, a strong one with a pungent aroma that hits you before it even touches your lips. She filled 3 glasses. Equal amounts. Identical technique. And then I saw it. A small movement. Smooth enough to be intentional. Subtle enough to be missed by anyone else. Her thumb pressed something between her fingers. A tiny white pill, ground into dust with practiced precision. I didn't hear it fall. But I didn't need to, because the reflection in my pilot's watch, the same watch Elena gave me on my 58th birthday, showed it clearly. The powder slipped into my glass. Tara stirred it gently with a spoon, pretending to mix the wine's aroma. Her eyes flicked up at me like a predator assessing whether the trap had been set correctly. Ethan saw nothing, but I saw everything. She turned away to grab napkins, and that 1-second distraction, that fraction of an opening, was all I needed. I switched our glasses, silent, precise, clean. The move of a man who has survived a battlefield. Dinner where the mask begins to slip. We sat. Ethan talked about work he hated. Tara talked about neighborhoods she wished to live in. They spoke of West Hills like it was already theirs. Every sentence felt like a pre-celebration of my absence. Tara sipped her wine slowly, watching my face. But I didn't touch mine. I just observed. Watched the flicker in her eyes. Watched her check Ethan's glass, then mine, then Ethan again. Something in her began to tighten. A thread pulled too taut. Then Ethan lifted his glass, the glass she meant for me. He raised it in a half-hearted holiday cheer to family. I lifted my clean glass and said in a voice so low I swear I felt the air tighten around us, "May we all get what we deserve." The room froze. Tara's hand paused mid-air. Her fingers loosened around her fork, because she heard it. Not the words, the meaning behind them. Ethan drank. Slow, unaware, certain of his power. The certainty of a man who believed his father was already defeated. He swallowed the truth that was meant to end me. The collapse begins. After dinner I cleared the plates. Ethan groaned softly once, then again. He sat back on the sofa rubbing his stomach. His breath thickened, heavy, uneven. Tara watched him carefully, too carefully, as if she weren't sure if what she was seeing was real or some performance neither of them rehearsed for. Her eyes darted from him to me, back to him, back to me. And then it happened. That tiny flicker of fear, barely there, but unmistakable, the first crack in the mask. She understood something had gone wrong. Not everything, but enough. I set my untouched wine glass on the table, the clean one, the safe one, and I said softly, "Merry Christmas, both of you." Then I turned away, letting them stand in the middle of a house glowing with Christmas lights, a house warm in color but colder than any morgue. I had just placed the napkin on the table when I heard it, a sound so small, so fragile, that anyone else might have missed it. A faint tap. I turned. Ethan was standing. And then his whole body jolted as if someone had dropped a live wire into his spine. The wine glass slipped from his hand. It shattered into a scatter of light across the hardwood floor, tiny shards glittering like broken stars. Ethan gripped the edge of the dining table, fingers clawing into the wood. But his legs were no longer listening. Only seconds passed, but they were the kind of seconds that stretch, that bend time, that silence the world. Then he collapsed, hard. His head hit the corner of the table with a dull, sickening thud. His eyes were open, but the focus inside them was gone, as if someone had turned the lights out behind the windows of his soul. Foam gathered at his mouth. His breath grew shallow and jagged. His legs twitched uncontrollably. And I didn't move. Not forward, not backward, not an inch. I simply watched, because I knew what this moment was, the consequence of a choice that wasn't mine. Tara's panic isn't for him, it's for herself. Tara lunged toward Ethan with a shriek, but instead of screaming for help, instead of shouting, "Call 911," instead of grabbing her phone, she froze. Her eyes darted to the dining table, then to the kitchen, and without warning she sprang to her feet and sprinted straight into the kitchen. Not to save Ethan, but to save herself. I followed slowly, stopping just before the doorway. From where I stood, through the thin beam of light spilling across the floor, I saw her tear through drawers, not for medicine, not for towels, not for anything that would help the man convulsing beside her. She was searching for a small plastic bottle. The bottle. The one she crushed. The one she poured into the wine. The one she thought no one would ever find. Her hands trembled as she finally dug it out from beneath a stack of napkins. She turned toward the trash can, and I watched it all happen through the faint reflection on the window pane. What Tara didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that Marjorie had installed a porch camera outside that very window, a camera facing inside, recording everything. Tara's voice cracked as she muttered, "No one saw. No one saw. No one saw." Her hands shook, not because she feared losing her husband, but because she feared losing her freedom. And then, ding-dong. The doorbell sliced through the chaos like a blade of ice. Tara froze. The bell rang again, harder this time. Urgent. I walked to the front door calm as a man walking into a storm he has already studied on radar. When I opened it, everything changed. The arrival of the army. I never asked for. Standing on my porch was Barbara Lindstrom. Her black coat fluttered in the winter gust. Silver hair brushing against her cheek, her expression a mixture of urgency and resolve. Her eyes met mine, and the slightest nod told me she knew exactly what she was walking into. Beside her stood 2 Bend police officers, their reflective vests glowing under my porch light. Behind them, Julia Thompson from the Bend Education Foundation holding a folder thick with legal documents. And at the very front, recording everything with her phone raised like a shield, stood Marjorie Lane. Her face was hard as cut stone, her eyes sharper than any weapon Ethan and Tara ever wielded. I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside and opened the door wider. The officers entered first. Tara sprinted from the kitchen, eyes wild, face pale, hands smeared with a fine dust of white powder. No. You can't come in. Ethan needs help. He needs help. But she didn't reach for her phone. One of the officers held out a hand. Ma'am, step aside. We received a report of a possible poisoning. Tara froze. A full body paralysis. Shock. Recognition. Terror. Barbara walked past, her eyes scanning the scene like a seasoned surgeon. She spoke to me quietly but loud enough for Tara to hear every syllable. Henry. We came exactly on time. The house becomes a crime scene. The officers knelt beside Ethan, checking his pulse. Unstable vitals. Possible toxic reaction. Another officer moved through the room with methodical precision, collecting evidence. I stood with my hands calmly clasped in front of me. Not like a victim, not like a suspect, like a witness, a survivor, a man finally done being prey. The police gathered Ethan's wine glass. My glass. The pill bottle. Tara tried to throw away. A kitchen towel dusted with powder. Footage from Marjorie's porch camera. Photos of the scene. Then one officer unlocked Ethan's phone and his eyes narrowed. There's a reminder scheduled for January 5th. He read it aloud. Move Dad's things out. Silence. Long. Cold. Suffocating. Tara broke first. She screamed a raw, ragged sound of fear and fury. You switched the glasses. You switched them. You tried to kill him. It's your fault. She lunged toward me, but the officers caught her easily. Her body shook with panic, and I, for the first time in months, felt absolutely nothing. I looked straight into her eyes, calm as snowfall, and I said, He only drank what you prepared for me. The room fell silent again. A silence so heavy it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Barbara steps into the light. Barbara approached the officers. I'm the one who filed the initial poisoning concern 3 days ago, she said, along with reports of forced guardianship attempts, financial fraud, and unapproved entry into the victim's home. The officer nodded. We've reviewed your documents, Ms. Lindstrom. Julia stepped forward, holding the ownership file. The property has belonged to the Bend Education Foundation since December 22nd. Henry Collins holds lifetime residency. Ethan and Tara Collins have no legal authority here. Tara's knees buckled beneath her. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing not out of grief, but out of realization. Every path she thought was open was now sealed shut. The final look. As the medics lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, his eyes opened for a brief, wavering second. He looked at me, not with hate, not with accusation, not with anger, but with a question broken and small. Dad. Since when did you know? I answered softly. Since the day you let greed speak louder than blood. The ambulance doors closed. The siren wailed, and the darkness finally peeled back from my home like a storm losing its power. Barbara stepped beside me. Henry, she said quietly, you did everything you needed to do. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the doorway, the decorations, the table Elena once set for our last Christmas together. And I realized something. Tonight wasn't the end. It wasn't the collapse. It wasn't the ruin. It was the beginning of justice. There are rooms in this world that strip a person down to who they really are, not with force, not with violence, but with silence. For me, that room wasn't Elena's old bedroom. It wasn't the garage where Ethan and Tara whispered in the dark. It wasn't the kitchen where Tara stirred death into a wine glass. It was courtroom 3 of the Deschutes County Courthouse on the cold morning of March 3, 2025. The Oregon sky that day hung low and gray, the color of old ash. Wind swept across the parking lot as I stood in the hallway with Barbara by my side, her silver hair lifting slightly in the draft like a quiet banner of resolve. At the end of the corridor, the courtroom doors opened. I walked in. Not slow, not hesitant, not bowed. I survived war zones. I would survive a courthouse. Ethan was escorted inside moments later. No handcuffs this time, just the slumped posture of a man who had spent 3 months moving between a hospital bed and a holding cell. He didn't look at me. Behind him sat Tara, hands shackled in a thin line of cold metal, the same hands that had dropped white powder into my glass on Christmas Eve. Her head hung low, hair veiling her face. The sharpness she once carried was gone, washed out like ink in a winter storm. Then the clerk stood. Her voice echoed through the quiet chamber as she read the charges. Attempted poisoning, elder abuse, fraudulent loan application, identity theft. Each one dropped into the room like a stone sinking into deep water. Ethan's hands tightened around the chair. Tara didn't move, not an inch. Barbara presents the evidence. When Barbara rose, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She didn't pace. She simply spoke with the calm authority of a woman who has seen too many families torn open by greed. Your Honor, here is the evidence. One by one, she laid them out like ammunition. 1. The garage. Audio. Tara's voice filled the courtroom. Are you sure those $400 pills were worth it? I don't want him waking up. A gasp rippled through the room. 2. The $250,000 loan application. A signature reading, Henry Collins, but the handwriting bent wrong, forced careless. 3. The porch camera footage. From Marjorie's house, clearly showing Tara trying to throw away the drug bottle moments after Ethan collapsed. 4. Banking login records. Multiple failed login attempts from a device in New York, Tara's old residence. 5. Ethan's phone reminder. A notification scheduled for January 5th. Move Dad's things out. Cold, clinical, planned. 6. Foundation ownership. Confirmation. Julia stepped forward. The property legally transferred to the Bend Education Foundation 3 days before the incident. Mr. Collins retained lifetime residence. Ethan and Tara had no legal authority over this home. Each piece of evidence tightened the noose they had woven with their own hands. When the prosecutor finished, the courtroom went still. Ethan breaks. First, Ethan pushed himself to his feet, sudden shaking. He turned toward me, his face flushed, eyes wet not with remorse but with rage. You chose your pride over your own son. The room held its breath. I stood, not to shout, not to strike back. I simply met his eyes, the same eyes I had watched grow from a toddler's innocent wonder to a man I no longer recognized. And I said, my voice low and steady, honor is the only thing that kept me alive. And you sold yours for less than the price of this house. Ethan crumpled back into his seat. Tara kept her head bowed. Even she couldn't look up now. The sentencing. The judge flipped through the files. Then he looked at Ethan, not unkindly but firmly. Mr. Ethan Collins, due to your lack of prior offenses, your cooperation with investigators, and the request for leniency from the victim, Mr. Henry Collins. I closed my eyes. Not for Ethan's sake, but for Elena's, because she once told me forgiveness isn't for them. It's so you don't lose yourself. The judge continued. I hereby sentence you to 2 years of suspended jail time, and 400 hours of community service at the Ben Veterans Home. The Veterans Home, where men my age, my rank, my memories live out their quiet final chapters. It wasn't punishment. It was a lesson I had never been able to teach him when I was still his father. Then the judge turned to Tara. For Ms. Tara Collins, 5 years of supervised probation and a full no-contact order with Mr. Henry Collins. Tara exhaled a long, hollow breath like a person watching the last exit disappear behind them. Financial collapse. A representative from Ben Federal Bank stood. The fraudulent loan has been canceled. The entire case has been transferred to our Financial Crimes Division. As for legal fees, they are responsible for every cent. The final blow. With their current debt load, bankruptcy is likely. Not because of me. Not because of vengeance. Because greed always collapses under its own weight. After the verdict, when court adjourned, the room slowly emptied. Barbara placed a hand on my shoulder. "You all right, Henry?" I looked through the narrow courtroom window as snow drifted across the parking lot, soft, pale, and quiet, as if the world itself were exhaling. I answered her slowly, "Today, I didn't win. Justice did." Then I walked out of the courtroom, each step echoing across the tile floor, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a man who had finally reclaimed every piece of himself. There are punishments handed down by the court. And then there are punishments delivered by life itself. A judge sentences you once, but life sentences you every single day. And after that trial, I realized something I should have seen much earlier. Ethan and Tara would not be broken by prison time fines or legal documents. They would be broken by their own reflection every morning they opened their eyes. June 12, 2025. Bend, Oregon. Sunlight cut across the sky like a white blade. I stood outside the Bend Veterans Care Home, a place that once helped me breathe after war. And today, it was going to teach my son a lesson I never could when he was still a boy. Ethan was pushing a wheelchair. The morning light hit his face, exposing the wrinkles and dark circles that had carved themselves there in the past 3 months, marks he did not have before Christmas. I stayed far back. I wanted to see, not be seen. In the wheelchair sat Mr. Herschel, 75, missing 2 fingers, one eye, cloudy mind shattered by PTSD. He snapped at Ethan, barked orders, muttered curses, jerked unpredictably. And Ethan, my son, bent down, spoke softly, patiently, so gently it didn't sound like him at all. A staff member whispered beside me, "He cried on his first day, Mr. Collins." Not from guilt, but because he had absolutely no idea how hard old soldiers fight. Long after the war is over. I nodded. Those weren't tears of repentance. They were the tears of a man finally realizing what he had destroyed. The 3rd day. Meeting the war. He never fought. On day 3, Ethan was assigned to clean the room of Mr. Valdez, the most severe PTSD case in the building. The room was a battlefield, shredded paper-colored marker scribbles covering the walls. The sharp smell of sedatives. Shards of glass from the night Valdez had a violent flashback. Ethan stood at the doorway, gripping the frame like a child bracing himself against a storm. My friend Mark, another veteran, later told me I saw him shaking Henry, like someone seeing war for the first time. He asked me, "Uncle Mark, how long did Dad live like this?" I looked down at my own hands. How long? More than 20 years. And my son, the boy who once bragged about my service, had never spent a single minute trying to understand it. But now, every day he had to scrub the floor of a man battling the monsters in his own mind. Every scream from Mr. Valdez was a slap across Ethan's pride. Karma doesn't need violence. Karma only requires truth. And Ethan was finally seeing it. On July 2, 2025, a letter arrived. No return name, no return address, just handwriting that shook like each word weighed a pound. Tara. I opened it. "Henry, I'm sorry. I was drowning in debt, fear, selfishness. But what I did, there is no excuse. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want to say, I was wrong. No tears, no begging, no, but I only did it because, no, please understand. Just the naked confession of a soul that had finally run out of lies to hide behind. I set the letter down. The room grew so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, old but steady. I wrote back only this: I forgive you. But the law will handle the rest. Nothing more, nothing less. Forgiveness has limits, and Tara had crossed every one of them. A week later, another envelope arrived. This one from the care home. Sender Ethan Collins. I sat in Elena's old reading chair, the chair she used to curl up in on summer afternoons. Sunlight from Bend filtered through the curtains, illuminating the page as if the words were trembling. Dad, I used to be proud of being an Air Force pilot's son. I used to brag about you, about Iraq, about everything you survived. And then I forgot what any of that meant. I thought I was smarter. I thought the house mattered more than the man who raised me. But when I push wheelchairs for men your age, when I hear their stories, I finally see what I didn't want to see. I lost myself. Long before I lost you. I set the letter down. No relief washed over me, no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a pain finally given a name, a pain I had buried under ice for a year. I opened Elena's wooden box. Her letter was still there, the one that pulled me out of that December darkness. When the world makes you forget who you are. Remember, you once knew how to fly. I placed Ethan's letter beside Elena's. Not to forgive him, not to welcome him back, but to acknowledge the truth. Not everyone comes back from what they've done, but some at least learn to see the ashes of the bridge they burned. Later that evening, I stood on the porch of my little cabin. Summer wind moved through the tall Oregon pines, carrying the scent of resin and sun-warmed bark. A smell Elena always said felt like freedom. Across the road I could see the courtyard of the veterans' home. Now and then Ethan's silhouette passed by, pushing a wheelchair, adjusting a blanket, bending to listen to an old soldier. He didn't see me. I didn't call out. And that silence no longer hurt. I don't need Ethan to come back. I don't need Tara to apologize again. I don't need a reunion dinner. I don't need promises to do better. I only need one thing: I no longer carry anger toward them. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve to live without a stone weighing down my heart. I looked up at the wide blue sky and whispered, Elena, I did what you wanted. Then I turned and walked back inside. Not to close a chapter, but to open the final one. The chapter of a man who lost everything, stood up, and reclaimed the honor that had nearly been taken from him. Some days mark a life, not with gunfire, not with screams, not with breaking glass, but with a quiet so deep, you suddenly understand that you have survived. November 12, 2025 was one of those days. A thin sheet of powder snow covered Bend that morning. The sky was silver gray, still enough that you could hear snow settling on the metal roof of the community center. I stood outside the Elena Collins Project, the workshop for young veterans I founded almost a year after the darkest Christmas of my life. The navy blue wooden sign glimmered under the frost. Elena's name, the woman who taught me what honor truly meant, was carved in raised letters, shining as if she were smiling somewhere in the cold November air. A year ago, I thought I would die. Today, I was walking into a room where young men and women were reclaiming what they had lost, something I had spent my whole life fighting to keep themselves. The workshop wasn't large, but the light inside was warm enough to feel like home. Photographs lined the walls, young vets who had climbed out of dark holes, the one who learned aircraft maintenance, the one who found steady work at the airport, the one who went back to college. The foundation had just approved another $50,000, bringing the total support to $125,000. I looked around as laughter echoed, the smell of strong coffee filled the air, and boots tapped across the wooden floor. To a man like me, a survivor of war, of loss, of betrayal, those sounds were more than noise. They were the steady heartbeat I thought I'd never feel again. A young man, Mason, walked up. "Mr. Henry, why is the workshop named after Mrs. Elena?" I touched the photograph on the wall. Elena, dark hair, smile like soft sunlight. Because she believed you only lose your path when you stop believing in yourself. And she taught me that honor should never be sold cheap. Mason nodded. In his eyes I saw gratitude, the kind I once wished to see in my son, and never did. Toward the end of the session, I called up Daniel Reyes, our top student this year. His shoulders trembled slightly as he stepped forward. A young vet who had spent 6 months drifting after discharge, lost, depressed, untethered, but who had fought his way back. I opened a wooden box. The room fell silent instantly. Inside was the pilot's watch, the one that reflected Tara's movement when she slipped powder into my wine glass on Christmas Eve 2024. The watch that revealed betrayal before it had the chance to kill me. I placed it into Daniel's hands. "This watch once helped me see betrayal," I said quietly. "Now let it help you see opportunity." Daniel swallowed hard, eyes reddening. "Why me, Mr. Henry?" I smiled, a small smile, but one shaped by an entire life, raised and shattered and rebuilt again. "Because you're living proof that a person can fall and still rise on their own 2 feet. The room erupted in applause. But the loudest sound wasn't applause. It was the quiet closing of an old chapter inside me, a chapter soaked in pain, loss, and betrayal. Finally finding its end, I stepped outside. Snow drifted in soft white flakes. The American flag fluttered, slow and steady, red, white, and blue, stitched together like the stories of every veteran who'd ever had to rebuild from rubble. Cold air brushed against my skin. A reminder of the battlefield, the place where I once believed honor could be lost forever. But I was wrong. Honor doesn't die. It sleeps. And if you hold on long enough, it finds its way back. Mason came to stand beside me, breath curling into the cold air. "Mr. Henry," he said quietly. I turned, and he said the one sentence that struck deeper than anything my son had ever told me. "If it weren't for this workshop, I think I would have ended up just like your son." His honesty cut like a blade. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "This world still has room for honor," I told him softly, "if we choose to protect it." He nodded and went back inside. I stood there alone in the snow, in the wind, in the memories that drifted through me like breath. The warm yellow light from the workshop spilled across the snow, stretching all the way to my boots. 1 year ago, I was standing in a dark kitchen with a poisoned wine glass and the sting of my own son's betrayal in my chest. Tonight, I stood in front of a building bearing Elena's name, handing down what she gave me with her entire life. The chance to rise, the chance to choose right, the chance to keep my honor. I looked up into the cold November sky, gray, quiet, endless. "Thank you, Elena," I whispered. "You brought me home." A gust of wind moved through the pines. Snow landed on my coat, soft as a touch. And in that moment, I knew I didn't just survive. I came back to life. If you've ever been betrayed, left out, used, or underestimated, if you ever thought you were too old to stand back up, leave a comment. I still stand. Because you do. Because you are. Because you deserve honor. Like this story to support more tales of justice and courage. Subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. New stories every day. And tell me where you're watching from. I read every single comment.